Hi, Luke Raymond from Inaxsys Security Systems here. Today we're going to talk about a topic that some people have been asking for with regard to the intrusion industry. Wired versus wireless. Why you would choose one over the other, which one fits what application, and generally speaking, how the industry has evolved with regard to wired versus wireless. Let's take a look. When choosing a wired versus wireless system, traditionally, back in the day, most of the systems we did, almost all of them, were entirely wired. The reason is because, traditionally wireless was not used in the security industry. So when we started, it was very simply, you'd have a contact or a motion detector or any security device hardwired within the wall out to a control panel. We still do that to this day, but traditionally there was a lot more hardwired used than wireless, simply because, to be honest, wired was a more secure technology. Once you installed that contact or that motion or that glass break detector and you ran that wire back to the control panel, well, as long as that wire stayed in good condition, it worked. The problem is, if that wire broke or degraded over time or the connection became loose, oftentimes installers would misunderstand the problem, and oftentimes it was blamed on the contact or motion and it was returned as defective, even if it wasn't. Then troubleshooting, they find out it's the wire in the wall. Well, now you have to run a brand new wire through that wall, which was a problem. This issue that was created by traditional wired systems was fixed by using wireless. Now, wireless has a whole bunch of other problems. Wireless, simply put, has no wires. So you have a control panel here and you have a wireless contact over there. Well, they communicate wirelessly. The problems in wired was the wire itself, which is susceptible to everything in the environment. Well, it's the same principle with wireless, except it's wireless problems. The nature of wireless technology means that the signal going from here to there is susceptible to whatever's in the environment. In the wireless world, that's EMI or RFI, electromagnetic interference and radio frequency interference. If we have too large of a wireless signal from, let's say, a wireless router or any other wireless devices, it can interfere with whatever frequency you're using for your wireless alarms. Furthermore, if there's too much of an electromagnetic field, just like running a cable for an alarm system too close to a ballast, let's say a lighting ballast, well, that creates a massive electromagnetic field and can interrupt your hardwired signals. Well, the wireless signals can be interrupted in somewhat the same way. If I have too large of an electromagnetic field from, let's say, a breaker box or something very, wireless machine or hardwired machinery in an industrial complex, well, that can interrupt my wireless signals. So then you have degradation of the signal interruption. So wireless had its problems and hardwired had its problems, which is why predominantly, not exclusively, predominantly, we used hardwired systems in smaller residential purposes as well as larger commercial purposes. Traditionally, wireless was predominantly used in residential purposes, residential where the walls were closed and you didn't want to run wiring, simply because of the limitations in distance. Well, all of that changed. Over time, we started to develop newer technologies, specifically in the wireless world. An example of this is the Ajax wireless. The Ajax wireless goes up to 2 kilometers of distance. Furthermore, how they avoid interruptions of signal due to EMI or RFI is with what they call a frequency hopping spectrum. What that means is there's 120 channels and it hops between one channel and the other. Now the panels will automatically scroll and scan these channels to find out which one has the least signal interruption. Choose that one. All of a sudden you start to have some noise on that channel, it'll rescan and hop to another one. It hops over multiple spectrums, allowing you to always have a good signal strength. So now, traditionally we would, especially in the commercial world or the larger residential world, we would lean towards that hardwired systems. Well, now wireless has become just as efficient and just as useful as hardwired is. Furthermore, when you're looking at it from that perspective, you have to look at the cost of the material. Are wireless products more expensive than hardwired? Yes, they are. Whereas a contact, traditionally a hardwired contact can run you, whatever, $5, let's say. Well, a wireless equivalent might be $50. Much more expensive. But whereas the hardwire is more expensive, the hardwired system is less expensive than the wireless, the time to install, as well as the cost of cabling and passing that cabling in a hardwired world, might price it higher than its wireless equivalent, which simply put is wireless, so you just put it up. Programming it is easy. So when you're deciding what system to use, first you have to look at the cost of the material. The hardwired contact versus the wireless contact as an example. Then you have to look at the cost of installation. How much is it going to be to run a new cabling for a hardwired system, as well as the labor to do that, versus the non-existent labor to, or almost no labor whatsoever, or programming to learn in a wireless contact. And then you have to look at the distance. Well, how far is it from the control panel hardwired to the contact or the motion detector? How long is it going to take to run that? Can I even get the signal that far? Because don't forget, your limitations are now on the voltage of the cabling and how long the run is, what type of cabling you're using. Versus wireless, with Ajax as an example, you can go up to 2 kilometers, so much, much larger distances. So when you look at those things, how much is it for the hardware itself? How much is it for the installation and the cabling? You can then decide what is best for you. Is it a wired system or a wireless? Now, the last thing you've got to look at is the size of the system. Because the larger the system, the more hardwired becomes potentially a much better solution. And an example is ICT versus Ajax. An Ajax panel, it has 200 zones of the hub 2 plus. 200 zones and 25 partitions is a lot. Furthermore, I can use something like a super switch to take over existing hardwired zones. If I have a retrofit system, this becomes a very powerful tool. However, I'm still limited by the 200 zones and 25 partitions. Well, what if I needed a much larger system? Well, unfortunately, in a wireless system like Ajax, you can't do that. So that's when you start to lean towards a hardwired system. The Protégé system from ICT is a really powerful tool in that it has no limitation. If you're going with the GX platform, you have an unlimited number or virtually unlimited number of, yes, access control doors, but also wired zones, which means you can run them all over the place. Because I can do an RS-45 bus, well, all the expanders for the zones are on that RS-45 bus, so I have thousands and thousands of feet to go. So again, once I start getting into that larger commercial application, I tend personally to lean towards something like the Protégé system from ICT, whereas when I'm doing a residential or small to medium business, I tend more to lean towards the wireless with Ajax. It really all depends on the application and the cost to acquire the job. Which brings me to the last choice. What are we talking about from an interface perspective? Traditionally, we had traditional keypads like this, LED keypads where you had to push the button and enter your code. Programming was traditionally done on these keypads in a lot of systems as well. Well, today we've advanced. So programming is done with a telephone or a computer, whether it's a hardwired system or potentially a wireless system. So now these interfaces have been upgraded. Now, for example, ICT has these really slick and really good-looking touchscreen keypads that can be used to interface with the system if you want. Programming, though, is not done on these necessarily. You do programming on your computer. When we get into the Ajax world, you don't even need a keypad. All programming and all interfacing can be done with your telephone. However, if you want a keypad, they have keypads, including these really slick-looking touchscreen keypads again. This is if you want a local interface, but again, it's not necessary today. Traditionally, we had these less appealing LED or LCD touch keypads. Now we've gone towards touchscreens, but more and more people are just using their phones. So which one is better? The answer is they're both good. It's a question of your application. Do you have a very limited budget? There's maybe cabling already passed and you can take over that system with a smaller hardwired alarm system? Okay, then that might be your choice. Is it a brand new install where all the walls are closed in a residence or in a commercial environment? If so, maybe wireless is your better choice. Is it a massive application, multi-site potential with hundreds and hundreds of zones of alarm? Well, maybe something like the ICT Protégé is your choice. Here at Inaxsys Security Systems, we are professionals, security professionals, and we sell all systems for all applications. we are perfectly suited to be able to suggest to you what might be the best solution for your application. If you have any questions or comments, or you want to reach out to us, leave your comments in the comments section below, or reach out to your local Inaxsys Security Systems rep. Thank you for your time. Cheers.